Brought to you by Penguin.
Utz by Bruce Chatwin, read by Julian, Wadham. An hour before dawn, on March the 7th, 1974, Kaspar Utz died of a second and long-expected stroke in his apartment at number 5 Shiroka Street, overlooking the old Jewish cemetery in Prague. 3 days later, at 7:45 a.m., his friend Václav Orlik was standing outside the church of St. Sigismund, awaiting the arrival of the hearse and clutching 7 of the 10 pink carnations he had hoped to afford at the florist's. He noted with approval the first signs of spring. In a garden across the street, jackdaws, with twigs in their beaks, were wheeling above the lindens, and now and then a minor avalanche would slide from the pan-tiled roof of a tenement. While Orlik waited, he was approached by a man with a curtain of grey hair that fell below the collar of his raincoat. "Do you play the organ?" the man asked in a catarrhal voice. "I fear not," said Orlik. "Nor do I," the man said, and shuffled off down a side street. At 7:57 a.m., the same man unbolted from inside the immense baroque doors of the church. Without a nod to Orlik, he then climbed into the organ loft and, seating himself amid its choir of giltwood and trumpeting angels, began to play a funeral march composed of the 2 sonorous chords he had learned the day before from the organist, who was too lazy to stir from his bed at this hour, and had found in the janitor a replacement. At 8 a.m., the hearse, a Tatra 603, drew up outside the steps. In order to divert the people's attention from retrograde Christian rituals, the authorities had agreed that all baptisms, weddings and funerals must be over by 8:30. 3 of the pallbearers got out and helped each other open the rear door. Utz had planned his own funeral with meticulous care. A blanket of white carnations covered the oak coffin, although he had not foreseen the wreath of Bolshevik vulgarity that had been placed on top. Red poinsettias, red gladioli, red satin ribbon, and a frieze of shiny laurel leaves. A card offered condolences. To whom? From the director of the Rudolphine Museum and his staff. Orlik added his modest tribute. A second Tatra brought the 3 remaining pallbearers. They had squeezed themselves into the front seat beside the chauffeur, while on the back seat sat a solitary woman in black, her black veil awash with tears. Since none of the men showed any inclination to help her, she pushed the door open and, shaking with grief, almost fell onto the slushy cobbles. To relieve the pressure on her bunions, the sides of her shoes were slit open. Recognizing her as Utz's faithful servant Marta, Orlik rushed to her assistance, and she, collapsing onto his shoulder, allowed him to escort her. When he attempted to carry her brown leatherette bag, she wrenched it from his grasp. The bearers, employees of a rubber factory who worked night shift and doubled for the undertaker by day, had shouldered the coffin and were advancing up the main aisle, to music that reminded Orlik of the tramp of soldiers on parade. Halfway to the altar, the procession met the cleaning woman, who, with soap, water and a scrubbing brush, was scrubbing at the blazon of the Rosenberg family, inlaid into the floor in many-coloured marbles. The leading bearer asked the woman most politely to allow the coffin to pass. She scowled and went on scrubbing. The bearers had no alternative but to take a left turn between 2 pews, a right turn up the side aisle, and another right to pass the pulpit. Eventually they arrived before the altar, where a youngish priest, his surplice stained with sacramental wine, was anxiously biting his fingernails.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?